In 1998, a signal was sent toward the far side of the Moon. It was never supposed to come back. The transmission was simple: a controlled pattern, a test, a message aimed into silence. But 5 years later, that same pattern appeared again. Not from orbit, not from deep space, not from any satellite, station, or probe. It came from somewhere beneath the Earth, from a place of pressure, darkness, and ancient cold, from the bottom of the ocean. And hidden inside the reply was something worse than a signal. It was a correction, as if whatever answered had understood the message and wanted to change it. There are places on Earth that still feel untouched by human history, not because they are empty, but because they are too deep to reach, too dark to know, and too vast to fully understand. The deep ocean is one of those places. It covers most of this planet, yet we have explored only a fraction of it. Below the reach of sunlight, the world changes completely. Color disappears. Sound stretches into impossible distances. Pressure builds until metal bends and glass threatens to fail. Down there is no horizon. No wind. No human sound. Only cold water. Drifting particles, distant echoes, and silence so complete that even the smallest noise feels unnatural. The seafloor is not flat. It is broken. It rises into mountains taller than anything on land. It falls into trenches deeper than valleys carved by time. There are plains of black sediment, fields of volcanic stone, hydrothermal vents, fractures, and buried formations that no one has ever seen directly. It is often said that we know more about the surface of the Moon than about our own ocean floor. That is not just a poetic idea. It is a warning. Because when something impossible appears in space, people assume it came from somewhere else. But when something impossible appears in the deep sea, it came from below us. And that may be far more disturbing. The original transmission was not part of a search for life. At least, not officially. In the late 1990s, a small multinational research program was studying signal behavior across extreme environments. The idea was technical. How does a structured message break down when sent through long distances, hostile mediums, or indirect reflection zones? One team worked with radio astronomy. Another worked with marine acoustics. A short encoded pulse sequence was designed for both experiments. It was mathematical, recognizable, built around repetition and prime spacing so that it could stand apart from random noise. One version was transmitted by radio toward the far side of the Moon during a controlled array test. Another version was adapted into an acoustic format and stored for deep-sea comparison work. Nothing unusual happened at the time. The Moon signal vanished into silence, exactly as expected. No answer was received. No anomaly was reported. The marine version was archived and mostly forgotten. Years passed. But deep ocean monitoring systems do not sleep. Across the Pacific, research stations anchored in abyssal zones continued listening to the planet. They recorded tectonic movement, whale migration, ice fracture, current behavior, and long-distance seismic resonance. These stations relied on hydrophones, low-frequency recorders, and timing systems sensitive enough to detect sounds most humans would never hear. They were not looking for replies from space. They were listening to Earth, which is why the anomaly was so hard to accept, because it did not arrive as chaos. It arrived as a pattern. And in the deep sea, patterns mean intention. The first confirmed detection happened on November 14, 2003. Station K-42 was moored above a deep basin in the western Pacific, near a poorly mapped region of broken seafloor and sediment collapse zones. It sat in water more than 5,000 meters deep, far from shipping routes and far from any major platform or military corridor. Just after 3 a.m., one of the passive listening channels captured a sequence of tones so clean that the night operator assumed it was instrument contamination. 3 pulses, short pause, 2 longer pulses, then silence. 38 seconds later, it repeated dot again, dot and again. The signal was weak, but structured. It did not drift like whale song, it did not rumble like seismic noise. It did not smear across the band the way machinery often does underwater. It sounded placed. The operator ran a comparison against the station archive. No match. Then he widened the search to older experimental libraries attached to the Research Consortium database. That was when the first problem appeared. The sequence matched the mathematical profile of the old moon transmission. Not perfectly, but close enough to alarm the review software. At dawn, analysts checked for every ordinary explanation: first clock errors, crosstalk, rebroadcast contamination, surface vessel interference, reflection from distant military sonar, a corrupted test file. None of them fit. The station had not transmitted anything. No nearby source could account for the geometry of arrival. And triangulation, using timing differences across the array, produced a result no one expected. The signal was not coming from above the station. It was coming from below it, not from the water column, from beneath the seafloor. The first survey vessel arrived 6 days later. Its crew treated the anomaly like a technical problem. They brought multi-beam sonar, sub-bottom profilers, magnetometers, sediment corers, and a remotely operated vehicle built for deep-water inspection. No one wanted to use words like impossible, not yet. The basin looked ordinary on the first pass. Soft sediment plains dot low escarpments. Ancient rock lines buried under drifts of silt. Nothing on the wide scans suggested an obvious structure or cavity. Then the profiling data was processed. Directly beneath the source zone, the sediment layers bent around an empty volume, a void. Not large enough to be a major cave system, but too cleanly bounded to ignore. The edges were smooth in a way natural collapse chambers rarely are. The roof appeared stable. The cavity extended horizontally beneath the plane and then vanished beyond the instrument's deeper resolution. A first descent with the ROV was scheduled that afternoon. The vehicle dropped through black water for nearly 3 hours. Its lights illuminated only drifting particles and the occasional pale body of deep-sea life passing through the beam. When it finally reached the bottom, the basin floor looked lifeless and still. Then the pilot found the depression. It was circular, shallow at first. A gentle sink in the sediment no more than 20 meters across. At its center, the mud looked thinner, as if something beneath had disturbed it repeatedly over time. As the ROV moved closer, its forward lights caught the edge of an opening, not a hole torn by geology, a ring dark. Mineral-coated, too regular. The pilot hovered above it for only seconds before the instruments began to fail. Compass drift. Image tearing. Acoustic modem instability. Short telemetry gaps. Then a sudden yaw rotation without command. The tether came tight. The surface crew ordered an immediate retreat. When the ROV returned, one outer panel showed fine parallel scratches that had not been present before the dive. No collision had been recorded. The second descent went deeper into caution. Lower lights. Slower approach. Independent data logging. This time the vehicle reached the opening and angled its camera downward. The darkness below was not empty. At first, only suspended silt moved in the beam. Then something hard emerged beneath it. A slanted surface, then a second one intersecting it at a clean angle. The ROV was looking into a buried chamber. And just before the feed failed again, the hydrophone aboard the vehicle recorded a faint sequence rising through the hull. 3 pulses to pulses the reply, but stronger now, as if they were closer to its source. The investigation should have ended there. Instead, it widened. Because every new measurement added another layer of discomfort. The first clue came from timing analysis. The deep-sea signal did resemble the old lunar transmission, but it was not a simple repetition. Small interval changes had been inserted into the pattern, not random noise, not drift. Inserted. When converted into numerical spacing, those changes formed a descending sequence consistent with the basin's measured depth steps around the depression. It looked like a profile, almost like directions. The second clue came from material evidence. Sediment cores taken around the opening contained trace concentrations of metallic compounds not expected in that section of the basin. Not enough to prove construction, but enough to suggest long-term contact with worked material buried below the mud. Then the biological samples returned. Microbial colonies in the water immediately above the opening differed sharply from those collected just a short distance away. Their chemistry suggested exposure to minerals and surfaces outside the normal basin environment. Some researchers argued for hydrothermal contamination, but no venting source was detected. The third clue was sound. A lower layer emerged beneath the reply sequence. At first it seemed like background resonance. Then analysts isolated it and found a slow, repeating vibration under the main signal. Not a tone, a reverberation. Metallic. Deep, like something large responding inside a hollow space. The fourth clue was visual. On the third successful descent, the ROV used side illumination instead of direct forward lights that changed everything. The sediment around the opening thinned in the angled beam, revealing faint surfaces below. Not rough rock. Not collapsed rubble. Walls. Long surfaces curving downward beneath layers of mineral buildup. Sections interrupted by recesses spaced too evenly to dismiss. The vehicle drifted a little lower. One of the recesses caught the light. For a moment, it reflected back with a dull, polished sheen. Then it went dark again. As the pilot began to pull away, the video glitched. A burst of white static filled the screen. When the image cleared, the ROV had rotated 12 degrees to the right. No command had caused it. And on the audio track, hidden beneath the main pulse pattern, was a new fragment. A short sequence not present in any previous recording. It lasted less than 2 seconds. But when slowed down, analysts claimed it resembled knocking. Not mechanical rhythm from a motor, not random impacts. Knocking from somewhere below the chamber roof. The mission became more serious after the 4th week. The basin was rescanned using deeper sub-bottom frequencies and gravimetric modeling. This time the team was not looking only for the cavity beneath the opening. They were looking for extent. The results changed the entire story. The chamber below the depression was only the uppermost void. Beneath it, descending into the deeper sediment and fractured rock, was a much larger complex of connected empty volumes. Some were circular, some rectangular, some long and tunnel-like. All of them followed alignments no geologist on the ship liked to discuss too confidently. They were too ordered. The upper chamber now looked less like the main feature and more like an entrance, a cap, a threshold above something much larger. The modeling suggested the lower formation extended into older crust where natural cavities of that scale should have been unstable or impossible in that configuration. Yet the voids remained coherent in every processing pass. The final descent was approved despite growing pressure to shut the operation down. This time the ROV was fitted with hardened shielding, duplicate clocks, independent inertial tracking, and a sealed optical recorder that could survive full signal loss. Its job was simple. Cross the opening. Descend as far as possible. Keep recording. The drop into the chamber was slow. At first the walls looked like mineral-coated stone. Then the geometry sharpened. Smooth planes, curved edges, vertical interruptions. Not natural. Not in any ordinary sense. The ROV entered a larger interior space, and its light swept across a floor broken by ridges and raised platforms buried in silt. The beam caught what looked like standing forms in the distance, then lost them again in drifting sediment. The pilots reduced thrust to avoid clouding the chamber. For 3 seconds, the image stabilized. What they saw never left the mission record. An immense inner wall, curving away into darkness, lined with repeating apertures or recesses at precise intervals. In the middle distance stood a vertical object blacker than the surrounding water, narrow and smooth, like a pillar or marker. The signal began again. Only now it did not seem to come through the water. It seemed to fill the chamber. 3 pulses to pulses. Pause. Then another layer emerged beneath it. Dense. Compressed. Too fast to hear clearly in real time. Every onboard system began drifting at once. Depth readings changed by meters without movement. Internal clocks desynchronized. Compass headings rotated in slow circles. The camera shutters stuttered. Then the black vertical object shifted, not quickly, just enough. As if it had turned slightly toward the ROV. The feed cut to static. When the vehicle was recovered hours later, the independent optical recorder contained one intact fragment from inside the chamber, a frame lasting less than half a second. The pillar was gone, or perhaps it had never been separate, because behind it, in the cleared water, part of a larger surface was visible, curved. Massive. Patterned. And far beyond the beam's edge, there were more recesses continuing into darkness. The structure inside the chamber was not an object. It was part of something far larger than the chamber itself. No single theory explains everything that happened in the basin, but 3 explanations continue to follow the case. The first is the geophysical theory. According to this view, the cavity system is natural, formed by rare tectonic and mineral processes. The signal resemblance to the old moon transmission may be an extraordinary coincidence shaped by acoustic reflections, pressure layering, and human pattern recognition. The apparent geometry could be an illusion created by sediment, angle, and expectation. This theory is cautious. Scientific. Safe. It also struggles to explain the inserted timing changes, the consistent chamber outlines, the material traces, and the synchronized instrument failures inside the void. The second is the buried installation theory. Some analysts believe the basin may conceal the remains of a secret Cold War listening system or experimental deep acoustic site. That could explain worked materials, repeating patterns, and even some electromagnetic interference. Perhaps the old moon transmission somehow triggered an automated response from forgotten machinery, but this theory collapses under scale. No known engineering program from that period should have been able to build such a complex at that depth and then leave no reliable record behind. And no abandoned human system should have been able to alter a signal pattern in such a deliberate way after years of silence. The third theory is the oldest and the most unsettling. It proposes that the reply did not begin in 2003. It began long before that. According to this idea, something beneath the seafloor was already there, hidden under layers of sediment, pressure, and geological time. Not a creature in any familiar biological sense, not necessarily a machine in any familiar human sense, a system. a buried intelligence, or the remains of one. When the lunar transmission was sent, it contained a mathematical structure clear enough to stand out from natural noise. Something below recognized it, then answered not to announce itself, but to guide attention downward toward the chamber, toward the larger structure beneath it. If that theory is even partly true, the ocean did not simply echo a message meant for the moon. It interrupted it. The basin was never publicly closed. But no major follow-up expedition was announced either. Data moved quietly into restricted archives. Several members of the team gave no interviews. A few left deep ocean work entirely. Years later, one autonomous hydrophone array deployed hundreds of kilometers away recorded a familiar pattern during routine monitoring: 3 pulses. 2 pulses. The same reply. Weak, stretched by distance, but unmistakable. This time, however, the inserted intervals had changed. Analysts mapped them again, expecting another depth sequence. Instead, they formed coordinates not for the original depression, for a second site farther west in older seafloor terrain that had never been directly surveyed. No expedition followed. At least, none that became public. The last known artifact came from the recovered optical recorder, reprocessed years after the mission. New enhancement software cleaned one corrupted frame enough to reveal something nearly everyone had missed. At the far left edge of the image, just beyond the main chamber wall, there was an opening. Not broken rock, a passage. And inside that passage, far deeper in the dark, a line of faint points reflected the ROV light back in perfect spacing, one after another, too evenly arranged to be random mineral shine, too still to be living eyes, too deep to be harmless. The frame ends there. No movement. No explanation. Only that impossible line vanishing into black water beneath the seafloor. The moon had received nothing, but the ocean had answered. And whatever lay under that basin had not sent a warning. It had sent directions. If something hidden beneath the ocean floor understood a signal meant for the far side of the moon, then how long has it been listening beneath us?